Addressing Gettysburg.
Pause for 1 second. Is his mic position okay? Are you getting a lot of rustling?
Every once in a while there's a little bit of a rub.
I'm just going to do this.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. It's me. I placed it in the wrong spot. Wait. No.
Can we cut back and we all have wigs? Just me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special edition of Addressing Gettysburg from the CWI's 2024 Summer Conference. And I am sitting here with Thomas Flagel. And yesterday he did a presentation in the main ballroom here on the 1913 Gettysburg reunion. And that was the 50th reunion. And there was a lot of interesting stuff. We've talked about this before on the show. We also talked about the 1938 reunion on the show. But Thomas, I remember, first of all, I went with my co-host, who's not here because she has to work, Bethany, and she was sitting up in front of me. And there were a couple of points where she turned around and there was a tear streaming down her cheek. Because she has allergies. No, because you moved her, and preceding that tear, I would get a chill up my spine from what you were saying. And I said to her, I said, we got to get him before everybody rushes him at the end. We got to get him to agree to come on the show. The reason why is because you do something that I feel is lacking in a lot of historians. And as great as the historians are that we hear, that we've had on the show, that we're here at CWI, and I have to be careful because I don't want to make it sound like I think they're monsters, because it's not what I'm saying. But there's a certain heart that you brought to it that I don't see elsewhere. But I also try to bring to my show. And so it resonated with me because I think we're kind of the same ilk in that regard. And I thought it was great. There were a couple of things that stuck out and I want to touch on today. And I'll go over them now and then we'll get into them in detail. The first thing that I wrote down was, and this is when I came in late. So the first thing that I heard you say was, let's just all agree we don't like blacks. Now, before you get all outraged, he was quoting, or not really quoting, but paraphrasing the sentiment of reconciliation. Right?
That comes from a chapter in 2001 book by David Blight by Race and Reunion. It's got a massive effect, just that one chapter, and more so than I wonder if he wanted. That the premise was this, in 1913, middle of Jim Crow, that the reunion was a reconciliation over race, that the white Northerners and white Southerners gathered together and agreed that they had common ground on dehumanizing, just diminishing, degrading, disenfranchising African Americans. And that has been so heavily debunked. But as you know, there's so many times in history, it's like trying to pry off barnacles from a hull, that when some theme gets into somebody's head, to unattach that is just laborious. Gettysburg started over a search for shoes, and the whole idea of Pickett's charge could have been the end of the war had it succeeded, all these things. It reminds me of when I have my students, that when I have an international show up, they'll say, I don't know anything about American history. And I go, great. First of all, you have an international perspective you're going to bring.
Right.
And second of all, you're not stuck with all those little tidbits that don't allow the deeper, more human more personal and more real, if I will, stories come through.
Well, you never let the truth get in the way of a good story, I think is really what prevails, at least in this country. I don't know about other countries. But you said that that's been debunked. Now, so I don't want to gloss over that because that might have sounded incendiary to some people at home. But if I can kind of make sure that I understand the gist of what you're saying, the prevailing knowledge has been that reconciliation was, well, us Southerners are not going to agree with you Northerners on the issues of the war. So the one thing we can both agree on now is that neither one of us like black people. Is that essentially what?
Yeah, it's an oversimplification, yeah. And indeed, there's racism pervasive.
Sure.
But there's some great scholarship. Carolyn Janney's work on the limits of reconciliation. One of my mentors, Robert Hunt, out of MTSU, recently retired, did a great piece on the Army of the Cumberland that a couple of years and then decades after the war, veterans wrote about, we did something great here. We defeated an authoritarian government. And so they in order to heal, that was one of the themes they embraced. Brian Matthew Jordan does a great thing on Marching Home, where Union veterans do have this sense of pride, but at the same time, the war hangs on them, and they're not welcome in their own communities because they are visual, especially for the amputees, reminders of the war that people want to forget. And so it's a complex thing, memory. And it's something I've come upon late in my career because I was one of those social scientific, leaning hard into the facts and mathematics of the war because it's more comforting.
Yeah.
I was one of those intellectual highbrow types who wasn't connecting with my students or general population. And my wife, who's my chief editor, said, no, the root word of history is story. And my baby brother, I was talking to the crew that before the podcast started, that my mother was a speaker on Catholic ministries and family counseling. Whether she was in a basement speaking or in a large auditorium, she would get standing ovations. And when I spoke, people went out like it was a funeral. And my baby brother said, listen, you got an issue. And I go, well, yeah, why does Mom get standing ovations? And everybody's macabre after mine. He goes, because you're depressing. Not all life is, one of the reasons people survive this is coming together in reunions, using humor, using reflection, using diaries, using humanism. And having a sense that their life had purpose, which a lot of Northern veterans started to embrace. And so he said, you also have to use humor like you do because it is something we use to cope.
Right.
And to relate and to connect.
And it heals.
It does.
And you used that well in the talk yesterday, I thought. Like you had people, see, I haven't heard your mom speak, but I know with the crowd yesterday, you really moved a lot of people. In fact, that one woman, I think, got up and said that it was her favorite one. She wasn't even going to attend. Remember?
Wow. Yeah.
Do you remember her?
I didn't hear she wasn't going to attend part, but I do. She was speaking about her
She went to
husband.
go to another one, but she ended up in the wrong room. She's like, oh, I'll just stay for this. And then it ended up being her favorite one.
They're so touching.
Yeah.
And I'll follow up about her story if I can. But, the funny thing is, the other lecture was on Johnson, Douglas, and Reconstruction. I wanted to go to that one.
Yeah.
It's like, could we schedule that one later? So, but she got up to talk and said she had lost her husband. I thought, he was a war veteran, committed suicide.
Oh, I took it as lost him here.
Oh, my gosh,
that's why
wow.
she ended up in the wrong. Really? Yeah, I didn't get that.
Yeah, it was.
Because I was behind. She wasn't right up to the mic. I couldn't really hear her well. So.
And we talked about that a long time. And I didn't mention one of the things I'm working on now is Civil War veterans and suicide.
Yeah.
Which it really, I'm not finding much immediately after the war or during the war. There is some, but not much. It really starts to accelerate when these guys get older. And which makes the reunion all the more valuable to them.
Right. There's another thing that you said that I wrote down and circled, which was the Union lost the war. And I've been saying this for years now. And I think it's funny that I think you said before you said that, I think you prefaced it with like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought this. but now I do. And 5 years ago is when I really started diving into all this stuff too, by doing the show.
Right.
And just kind of through osmosis, I started to realize that, yeah, as time goes on and I learn more about post-war, I realized the Union lost the war. They won on the battlefield, they won politically, the country came back together, but in the courtroom of ideas, or whatever, however court of public opinion, they lost.
Yeah, I agree.
How do you think that happened?
I'm currently writing a book on fortifications, and I'm starting to realize, just I'll have to preface it was my doctoral dissertation on fortification in Western theater, and when it was done, like any dissertations, I never wanted to see it again. And but Andrew Slapp out of Eastern Tennessee State University says, I think you have something. That the Union had fortified, which provided jobs, safety, and a nexus for self-emancipation for African Americans by the tens of thousands. And the Union didn't want them. So we can't feed you, we can't take care of you. And then they said, well, we're going to bury your dead, build your fortifications, clean your clothes, and feed you. And they go, well, we'll rethink this. So, and then the occupied areas became stabilized. So the white secessionists, even though they didn't like it, were not losing their homes or their properties. In fact, oftentimes they were getting mail, newspapers, food. If they'd signed the oath, were basically protected from the horrors of war. So there are several areas where the economy improves. And three groups that don't get together actually realize by rigid enforcement they have to cooperate, and they mutually benefit. When the war's over, the Union evacuates those immediately, and the vacuum opens up, and who enters? But the old guard. And that symbiosis is lost, the security is gone, the jobs for African Americans are gone, and you have black codes followed by Jim Crow. But that's not what caught me. I grew up in the Midwest, so I was not necessarily exposed to the reality of the 1960s and the 1970s of continued segregation. It was there, but I didn't see it because it wasn't in volume. And then I moved down to Middle Tennessee about 16 years ago. And I go, this is great. You know, this whole idea of Confederates and all this anger and all, these are fabulous groups I'm working with. All these preservation boards and everything, and I'm on this board and that organization. We're preserving things left and right. It's great. And then after a while I realized, wow, they're so happy to have me here as a professional historian, and I love being with these people, the great amount of excitement. And yeah, let's get this done. Could we do an archaeological search of this slave area? Could we find out where the cabins were? We could do it. We could do it. And then eventually I realized it's a subtle stuff. It's the bankers and the lawyers and the people who were junior and senior and the fourth and the fifth. No offense, they're trying to maintain their status. Yeah. And then I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at me for being so naive for so long. Right. And I realized I couldn't see it because A, I wasn't in it, and B, I'm not black. I'm not exposed to it. But then to be brutally honest, I finally realized I'm one of the tokens on these boards. A professional historian, but they're not doing a single thing I suggest. That was a tough one to take. Yeah. I probably need counseling for it. Jeez. It is frustrating to be the one in the crowd that knows what they're talking about, but no one listens because it's not really the point of why they're all getting together. Now I think we know what a doctor or a lawyer feels like. In Congress? Yeah, it's just like... Well, no, Congress is all lawyers, I guess. Right? Yeah. Some of them, but the number of people who think they know medicine or know the law or know the Civil War or history altogether, it's the one thing that has been valuable about aging and grad school and working with people like this is... I realize I'm dumb. I'm pretty stupid. Yeah. I know nothing. And every new horizon I cross is a massive new field that when I was younger and wanted to be definitive about everything and look smart,
Right.
is an entire universe that I know nothing about. Now I'm excited.
Yeah.
And I get to talk to people and listen and hear their stories. From anybody who's the plumber that I meet at a gas station to the great Gettysburg and Winchester experts I get to meet here, that I just thrill. I wish I had this attitude when I was 18.
Oh, can you imagine? Yeah, I'm the same way. Like with the energy and the can-do-itiveness you have at 18, if I could have the wisdom and maturity that I have now, oh my God. I would have been king of the world. Forget president. King of the world. It would have been amazing for me.
That whole question of what would you do if you had a time machine?
Yeah.
Go back and see Jesus' birth. Would you go back and kill Hitler? I'd go back at me at 18.
And slap you in the
I'd just
face.
slap me in the right. You cocky little. First of all, you don't know hardly anything. Second of all, get in the library. Third of all, don't date Karen. That's going to be 2 years that you're never getting back. It's a living nightmare. So,
So you and I are very similar.
we
have
met
the same
yesterday,
time machine
we
issues.
hit it off, and we have the same barber, and it's great.
So,
This episode brought to you by Wilson's Shoe Buffers.
by bit,
That clean,
by
glowing look.
minute. All right. This is another point that you made that I really liked. When you see a Confederate flag, it's not because the person is pissed that they lost in 1865, but that they lost in 1965. Unpack that, please.
That was a direct quote from Jenny Hessler, who had come from Winchester and came down to Franklin to be the director of the Battle of Franklin Trust. Mm-hmm. We were all excited to have her there, and within a year, she was run out. She did not have the glad-handing, kind of friendly smile, but then talk in the parking lot to do things type of the new style of the old smoky back room. And so she kind of got run out, and I was heartbroken. That was one of the many red flags right in front of me. That she has my upfront candor, let's be honest, right here, right now. I guess some people find abrasive, but we just find that's how you get things done,
right.
Where we're from.
Right.
And when she left, she told me that, and it stuck with me ever since. And that's where the seeds of, for lack of a better word, truth started to creep into my head. And I'm a slow learner. And it was years later when I go, holy smokes, this was 100 years of Confederate rule in the South that, because I didn't live here long term, I didn't see.
Right. And that kind of goes back to the North lost the war, right? The Confederate States of America lost and went away. But the Confederate States in America remained and grew.
Oh,
Trademark.
That is, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, you better, people at home, you
here
better
it is.
embroider
Okay?
that into a pillow.
If I see,
that is so...
if I see the Confederate States of America in America, or whatever the hell I just said, as a quiz show, I'm going to be really pissed off.
Make sure we're recording, make sure we didn't lose that. I mean, that's so true. I mean, that's brilliantly put. And I'm not being unctuous, it's or hyperbolic. Yeah.
I don't know what either of those words mean.
Okay, I don't know either. I just saw him once and said, I'm going to sound smart when I blurt this out. I just have I've been holding on to those
I don't
for
mean
2
to
years.
sound scrumptious or whatever you said.
I don't want to have a crusty, delicious outer coating, but yes. What
did I say now? I don't even remember
come on,
where
we have to roll
were.
that back?
Yeah.
I mean, because it was...
The Confederate States of America lost and went away. The Confederate States in America, I forget the rest. Go back and watch.
Stayed and got stronger.
Stayed and got stronger. And it's true. And because you know why? Because their bull made it into my textbooks in North Jersey.
Me too.
Where did you grow up?
Iowa.
Iowa.
And
so they're in your textbooks out there.
Yeah. In fact, for a long time, and it might be the case, in order to become a citizen of the United States, you have to take civics tests, including history. and for a long time, and it may still be the case, that one of the questions is, what was the primary cause of the Civil War? And one was slavery, and the other one was states' rights. Either answer was correct. And to this day, a poll recently said that, like somewhere around 43% said states' rights was the #1 cause, or at least, and a majority said the part of the cause. It was a great question yesterday. I can't remember the particulars, but and something I've learned over time, that who ran the federal government before the Civil War? The majority of the presidents were slave owners. And as I said, a Confederate apologist said something brilliant. If you can imagine, I'm being Midwesterner here in my acerbic tone, but said, he admitted the Confederacy stood for slavery for 4 years, but the United States flag stood for slavery for 77 years. Yeah. It was legal. And the presidents were just reflecting who people saw as powerful and successful. Indeed, the wealthiest people in the United States were in the South. Many Southerners were going, "You idiots in the North. You're paying people wages, all this. You can make huge money fast down here."
Right.
I think more millionaires lived in Natchez, Mississippi than I think the rest of the country combined in 1850.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling, the wealth. But the war against Mexico, that is a Southern landowner wish of expansionism. The All Mexico movement, when he's Senator and Secretary of War under Franklin Pierce, Jefferson Davis goes, "Let's take Cuba. We have to keep expanding. We're expanding southernward. You guys are expanding northward. We'll expand it southern, and this will be the wealth of the country." The real money is in the Caribbean, with the sugar and the cotton, the tobacco, the coffee, and the enslavement. We can turn Cuba into one of our greatest states. Take all of Mexico. Keep going. Thomas Jefferson in 1803, it goes from, I don't know if we're going to live much longer because the superpowers want us, to after the Louisiana Purchase, he envisioned an empire democracy that would go all the way from the Arctic Circle down to Patagonia. And this looked like it was manifesting itself. And so the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, that's a federal law that is enforced by federal marshals. And the courts, if anybody's accused, goes to a federal court under a federal judge. It's all paid by federal money. And the strongest senators are Southerners. It's after the war when the states' rights argument comes. And that's where you synopsize it so beautifully. That it's the states go, no, we're not going to enforce the 13th Amendment. We're not going to enforce the 14th. We're not going to enforce the 15th. This is where, in historiography, recently U.S. Grant is making a big comeback. Right. Because he is enforcing the law finally that Johnson wouldn't. Right. And by 1877, he goes, I'm going to follow the tradition of not running for a third term. And then the Compromise of 1877 happens. And for good reason. The North is sick of trying to change the 1%ers in the South who rule. And they just go, fine. We're going back home, and we'll try to establish our own union in our old Union states.
Well, and I hate to say this, but I always tend to blame not the perpetrators of an ill, but the people who allowed them to. So, in other words, I don't blame the Southerners, the Southern veterans, their wives, their widows, for perpetrating the lost cause and working to get it into my textbooks in New Jersey and yours in Iowa. I blame the Union veterans who were too tired to keep on fighting and didn't fight hard enough to stop them. And that may be unfair for me, but I also, you take it to anything. People blame Congress, and Congress is awful, and these people are terrible. It's your fault. It's not their fault. What do you expect from a pig but a grunt? If you send shitty people to Congress, you're going to have a shitty Congress. And you've been doing that because you haven't been doing your due diligence because you'd rather watch Honey Boo Boo. Is that show still on? But you know my point. So, but my point is,
Was she like 40?
Probably. She's even alive still. She's got her own kids. But my point is that my point is though that there are more people who don't agree. These are all extremists, and extremists can only live and flourish when the mainstream gets lazy, and so I say everybody hates the lost causers, and I get it because they annoy the hell out of me to this day, but they only thrive because we allow them to. There's more of us.
That's a fascinating think piece question, and one.
There's no need to think. Just take my word for it.
All right, sounds good. But on that same vein, a tiger cannot change its stripes. Stephen Fry said it so brilliantly that we are so inundated, as we oftentimes are, by the extremes, screaming at each other from a long distance,
right.
And the rest of us are in between in the valley, depressed, disillusioned, angry, and frustrated, and quite honestly, sometimes just plain bored.
See, that's
it's
interesting.
That great valley in the middle that has to do the hard work. What did Lincoln say?
But can I stop you there?
Sure.
I'm sorry, before we go into that. It's interesting that he calls it the valley in the middle, because I view us as the valley, not the valley, but the clouds in the sky looking down on the idiots. Because to put us in a valley means that they're higher than we are, and they're not. There are fewer of them. They're just louder.
Yeah.
And they're on the fringe.
I think
that's why we call them the fringe.
We need to adapt that attitude, I think.
I think there's one of my favorite lines in John Adams, the series on HBO, is when he's talking with Benjamin Franklin, and I forget what Adams says to him, but Franklin comes back and he goes, "I am an extreme moderate, Mr. Adams," right? And I was like, that's what we need. We need extreme moderates.
Yeah.
Those are because you know why? It's not an extreme. There are more of us. Most of us are moderate.
What is the plurality largest voting group in the United States?
What?
It's not Democratic. It's independents.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll float back and forth every once in
Right.
a while, but it's about 35 to 40% at any given time.
Right.
Who tells us we don't exist?
Right.
And as I tell myself and my students, there are a multitude of parties. Look at your voting ticket of which you can vote.
And they're all insane, but they're there.
But as opposed to the Republicans and Democrats. But
Well,
no,
that's true.
And the sad thing about it is the moderate Democrats and the vast majority. Let's be honest, the vast majority of extremists right now are on the right. This whole idea of both sides. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican, but the hard line is on the right, and one of their most powerful methods, and sociologists and anthropologists and some historians have noticed, the authoritarians are the one who play the victim card. They do it over and over
throughout
again.
history they've always done that.
And I didn't notice it until they told me, and now
See,
I can't unsee it.
It's interesting. I think they're both insane. I think they've both reached the same level of extremity or extremeness or whatever the word is. And I think they're both dangerous, and I don't want either one of them taking over. I cringe when I hear their absolutism.
Me at 18.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You were 18. You're a stupid kid at 18. What do you know about anything? I'm listening to people who are in their 50s and 60s who sound like 18-year-olds who have no gray area in the way they look at life, and it drives me nuts. Because I'm like, there's a Billy Joel song called "Shades of Grey," and it's basically, there's a lot of good lines in it, but it's basically about how I used to be so certain about things. I used to be, it's black and white. Kill him before he kills you. It's just, and now it's like, I'm not that sure anymore.
Yeah.
And he was around my age when he wrote the song. So like, I'm at that point where I'm not so sure that I feel that my way of looking at things is the right, the only way, and you must submit fealty to it.
Yes.
And that's what bothers me is we're not supposed to be that here.
Yeah.
That's other countries.
Right.
We're supposed to be, I want to do it this way. You want to do it that way. How about I'll do it a little bit this way, you do it a little bit that way. We'll both leave unhappy. That's a compromise.
The two it's a great point, and the two things I want to address that. One, Bertrand Russell, the great philosopher, and I'm paraphrasing, I can't quite remember the exact quote. He said, "The tragic thing of our world is that the idiotic are full of confidence and the wise are full of doubt."
Yes, because you're wise enough to know that you can get killed for opening your mouth.
Or
The idiots don't know
Or
it.
being inflexible. And that's another thing I loved about, and I mean love, about the United States Constitution. Authoritarian when it first comes out. The least democratic election we ever had was 1789, when only 1 out of 4 adult white males could vote. And that's 2% of the population. And slavery is legal, and women are marginalized. Native Americans.
Right.
But that Article 5 saying, amendments, we don't know everything. We don't know what's going to happen. And when you look at the Constitution, which a lot of people profess they know, but they don't read. I mean, there's a poll a few years back that said about 33% said they knew the Constitution really well, but only about 24% of them read it. And I go, how do you, where's it? Do you rub it in your belly? It comes in by osmosis? But if you look at it, what's so amazing about it is it's precisely what you're talking about. It's an algorithm.
Yeah.
It's not a document from on high. It's, you don't get along. I don't get along. What's step 2? It's not under if people don't agree, they're not going to agree.
This is a moderator.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a vehicle, a method, a tool by which when you reach your roadblocks, there are mathematics in it, left and right. 50% plus 1 vote, supermajority, 75% here. Here's a procedure, age groups, locations, time frames. And it's one of the reasons why the Founding Fathers called it an experiment and an engineering. That it was. So many people want to put our Founding Fathers in halos. I want to put them in lab coats because I think that's what they were doing.
That's interesting. Lab coats. I think like a professor's tweed jacket with the elbow pads, smoking pipe. But yeah, I mean, same idea. They're thinkers. They're experimenters. They're people who are trying to figure out where to go next.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah.
Knowing they didn't know everything. They were at that point. And that's, I can tell you that I grew up being taught great man theory, politics. It was presidents and kings and generals and all that. And so I started teaching that way, thinking that was history. When I started to realize, no, it's your family, your friends, your immediate support network, just the same way the soldiers at their union and back home functioned, the way we all do.
Yeah.
And it eventually became aware to me that I needed to utterly change the way I taught and look at history as the realness of all of us. And if there's anything I'm proud of, it's my understanding of how little I know. And I've studied more and more things, including Hinduism and the culture therein, which, counter to my upbringing, is comfortable with the idea of not knowing. And that's another reason why I love the profession we have, is that it teaches me perspective, it teaches me change over time, and it teaches me paradox is not only constant, it can be beautiful.
Yeah. So, the reunion.
Yeah, let's get back to that. That'd be good.
Look, now, so we recorded the lecture, and we'll release that too. So people will be able to go and listen to that for the entire talk. But give us an idea of the scope of this thing, because it was pretty big.
Yeah.
And how many veterans were there? And were they all Gettysburg veterans or Civil War veterans?
It was an amazing thing. By 1912, this was growing. This had such momentum and started going bigger and bigger that when things like that happen, thankfully, wiser minds allowed it to grow.
Yeah.
And it was initially only for Gettysburg veterans. And then by 1912, they said, let's have everybody who is an honorably discharged veteran come. And the money started to come in from the states and the federal government, northern states really, to provide provisions, security tents, transportation mostly. This becomes, by January, this is getting into the press as an exciting thing.
Right.
Estimated, we could probably have about 40,000 come. It ended up being about 55,000 officially, plus untold thousands more that came on their own. A little over 8,000 were Confederate, the rest were Union. And this also, because of its magnitude and all the press, 150 newspapers plus about 30 photographers, telegraph wires sending this information throughout the country, that it just grows even when it's starting. The attention is so massive that tens of thousands of people from around the area, and Pennsylvania, southern Pennsylvania, is close to a lot of urban areas, and the rail lines themselves are fully established. More and more people start pouring in. This one person said on Seminary Ridge, it was essentially impossible to move around on July 1st.
It's like when we have fireworks.
Yeah.
Have you ever been here when we have fireworks?
No.
Oh, you gotta sit on the battlefield to
Really?
watch the fireworks. Yeah. They don't do them on the battlefield. They do them at the rec park. But to sit on the battlefield, we always go to the angle, and then you hear the explosions echo down the valley.
Oh my gosh.
And there's just something very moving about that, to do that. But I digress.
I don't think so, because sound is a, we receive so much of our information through print and pictures. Sound is becoming a new avenue by which historiography is just diving in. The power of sound. And I didn't think about that until you said, this is the plains and the valleys and the hills would have echoed during the
exactly.
battle.
That's my point. And I'm a big sound guy.
Yeah.
And to me, like, if you want to experience history without actually experiencing the dangers of it, you have to have all five senses.
Right.
And I plan to one day make some kind of exhibit where you go in and it stinks like a battlefield. It sounds like a battlefield. It feels like a battlefield. I think there's a museum that has something like that, but there's no stink. I'd like to add the stink.
It's brilliant because, Jim Lewis from the National Park Service at Stones River, I was talking to him immediately after a tornado hit the place, and I said, what can I do to help? And he said, part of me doesn't want to do a thing, because right now it looks most like what it did after the battle.
Just torn up.
Yeah. And the rotting leaves and trees and the
Smell.
wetness and the smell, the chaos, the scything of the land.
Yeah.
But now it's a beautiful, tranquil park.
But that's the thing that I don't think would translate to the general public. Only like the real hardcore history nerds that also have a thing who are sensual, not in a sexual way, but in we like our senses stimulated. That still sounded bad, but what I mean.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of historiography lamenting the rise of suburbs, because they don't have the realness of cities or the countryside, all the beautiful and ugly things they're in.
They're terrible.
They're essentially, and it's fascinating, my grandparents lived on a farm, and when we went there, it's as if my lower middle class Midwestern sensories just exploded.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because you can smell and hear and be connected to so many things.
Yep.
So I don't think, let me know what I can do to support what you want to achieve, because I think that's the next big breakthrough.
$20 million.
Well, I'll see what I can find. Where's my wallet?
Good luck with that.
No, seriously, this is feasible. Anything is possible.
Help me find funding. I have so many ideas that will blow people's minds, but it requires money and people.
But that
maybe
very
not
thing,
blow people's minds, but
no, yes,
blow my mind.
The thing is that, well, it's impossible to end slavery in the United States. Wait, no, it's impossible for women to get the vote. Wait, no, it's impossible to get to the moon.
Well, it is impossible for someone with deep pockets to invest in Matt Calorie. That is a truth right there.
Don't depress me.
All right, listen. Let me go through a couple things here, and we'll just do it like rattle things off, okay? All right. So you have reasons why the veterans came back, right? Reason number one is to find a place of personal meaning, I guess, on the battlefield.
Right.
Okay. Give me an example of what you're talking about. You're just coming back to where you guys fought, right?
Right. A great example would be there's a woman who came. She had lost her husband. The records were vague, but he was killed somewhere along Emmitsburg Road. And she went there. James Longstreet, long dead, his widow was there as a reporter and ran into this woman and asked her what she was doing there because she was wandering around by herself and not a young person. And she said, I'm trying to find out where my husband fell. He didn't come back to me, but I want to come back to him.
Oh.
There's a lot of veterans, as I said, there was survivor guilt, so they would go back to where their comrades were gunned down and they had to keep going forward, and they never saw their comrades again. So they go back to that place.
Where he lost his buddy, or yeah.
There's another site where a guy was shooting at a place of exposure, and he was pretty sure that him or somebody else close to him had killed a Union soldier. And then another one came up trying to get that soldier back, and that soldier was shot. And another one came up, and that soldier was shot. And after time, he reflected, why were they running into open space to get this guy? And he's going, I think they were brothers.
Oh, geez.
And we wiped out a large part of a family right there. Ugh. And he came back to that spot essentially to ask forgiveness. So there's not only survivor's guilt, there's murderer's guilt.
Yeah.
Or I should say killer's guilt. I don't think they would have, as a normal human being, would have ever thought of doing this in their everyday life.
Oh, I'm certain not. No. And no matter how much you train, how young and full of piss and vinegar you are, once you do it, all that kind of maybe goes away, and you realize the gravity of what you've done, and now you're in it, and you're going to do it again probably, or someone's going to do to you.
Yeah.
So, now July 1st, during these reunion days, was called Veterans Day, but you said that almost no veterans spoke.
Yeah.
And I start to see a theme as you go through each one of the days here, that maybe these days are more about the blowhards of the current day and less about the veterans that they're supposedly honoring.
Back to our point of great man theory versus reality. And we see it to this day, as I made the point of the 75th and again really the 80th anniversary of D-Day, where who's speaking? It's the presidents and prime ministers, and who's not being talked to are the veterans. And I wanted to a certain point whether a lot of the conference talked about how much of the truth is coming out in letters and reporting in newspapers. And it was fascinating discussions in panels left and right saying, I don't necessarily want to share this, or I can't come to terms with it, or maybe this is how I do come to terms with it, all the complexities and the paradoxes therein. But I think the biggest thing about it is it is so horrific that people need a certain amount of, they'll find almost any way to cope with it. And that's probably the major theme there, that nobody responds the same way. As I say in my book, I was looking for a big central theme in the whole thing, and it was from a gunner of a reconnaissance plane in the Pacific Theater in World War II, Walter Bryant, and he says, each man has his own war. Well, I think we're afraid to talk to those veterans for actually hearing what they have to say. I know we're going a little bit long here, but I think of my next door neighbor who was a veteran of Laos and Vietnam, John Silva, who died a few years ago. And I go, John, why do we do that? Why do we say, thank you for your service and your sacrifice, and we don't say anything else? Why do we put you on a pedestal and therefore, like a statue without feelings and out of, you go, Tom, forgive people. They don't know what to ask. And they also might be being kind because they could be unleashing a torrent of emotions that person isn't ready to share at that moment in time.
Right. I've even encountered veterans when I did do the thank you for your service thing, they would throw it back at me. And not in a modesty type of way, but it would be like, like one of them just said, you know, I effing hate that.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, I said, why? And he said, because you don't need to thank me. I went and I did it. It was awful. And it was my stupid decision. And you guys have no idea what you're talking about. And I look at the way this country has become, and I don't think you are grateful for my service.
Wow.
Yeah, and
wow.
I was like, you know what? That's my favorite answer, because I would probably feel the same way if I were you. And I got to know him more, and I'd hear his stories, and I heard, you know, the things that he saw, the way he saw the way our government and our military operates, and the things that it does, and he's like, I don't want to be a part of that. It's not what I believe in. It's not the country I thought I was born in, and I don't want it. And it's not that he's ashamed of his service. Right. He wouldn't even. I mean, we were at ceremonies where they would ask veterans in the audience to stand up and be recognized, and he refused.
Oh my!
Yeah, he didn't want anything to do with it.
And that's another. You know, I've been to a lot of events like that, including our own graduations. And I understand the gesture, but I also think you're kind of pointing these people out when they may not want to be. So I think
I totally agree. Well, no, and that's why I hate that stuff now, because of the way he convinced me that is a really almost a condescending thing to do, because you're people that didn't serve, and you don't really know what you're saying. You don't really know what they did, and it's like when you meet somebody, you go, "How are you?" You don't really give a shit how they are, and they know it, and so it's just this knee-jerk reflexive thing. It's thank you for your service, thank you for your service, and then also, you know, there are some that do expect it. And it's almost like, did you sign up just so that people would thank you for your service down the road? Like, and so I'm with him. I take the cynical approach to that. I take the cynical approach to a lot of polite things, though.
Yeah.
Like after 9/11, when everyone was a hero, or during COVID, when everyone was a hero.
For about
if everybody's a hero, nobody's a hero. Yeah, for 2 weeks, exactly. But you can't have everybody be everything.
Yeah.
Because then it just dilutes the word.
It does. It's like watching, you know, one of the great themes of the movie, The Incredibles, is if everybody is incredible, nobody is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's and I was laughing at your point about how you doing. I used to be an international student director at another college, and one of the things we would do is hand out things about U.S. culture that they may or may not be aware of. And one of the things is United Staters like to say, "How are you doing?" But they don't actually care for a response. Yeah. This is what we say. And another thing, on July 2nd, the major theme was looking for comrades. And it's a point that brings me back to John Silva, that and the very point on veterans being out and about. And I was always embarrassed, or I don't know what the reason was, but you see veterans with Vietnam vet, Korean vet, or they served on a certain ship. And John occasionally would wear a hat that said Navy on it, and I said, "John," he was with the Seabees, "John, why do those guys wear that?" And he had this most profound response. He said, "We're not looking for compliments, we're looking for each other."
See, and that's the thing. That's what I don't think people get, is like they have an experience that is indescribable, that only they understand, and they shared with each other, and they don't want to know from what we have to say. They don't care what we have to say. Okay, maybe some of them want to feel appreciated. I'll give them that, and that they're not all like my friend. Maybe some of them want to feel appreciated. Many of them, I am sure, are very proud of their service, and I don't think that should be taken away from them. I'm proud of their service, but I'm not going to go around and just be like, "Thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you for your service," because I feel like I don't even mean it. And I do mean it. So it's like, and I brought this up yesterday in another interview, that Larry David, you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Love it.
Okay, so remember when Sammy's fiance comes over and they're having a dinner party? It's like one of the later seasons, and everybody, they introduce him, and everybody's like, "Oh, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you." And it gets to Larry, and he's just like, "How you doing?" Right? I'm Larry in that situation.
It's, you know, the great thing about it is I used to do that too, because I was taught that's what you do. until I listened like you did.
Yeah.
And that's where I finally learned later in life, Tom, you don't know what it's like to be a female. You don't know what it's like to be black. You know what it's like to be unemployed for a time, but you don't know what it's like to be, you have no idea if you're ever going to get the next meal. All these things, you have no idea. And that's where I went from the 18-year-old talking to the, I think it was 45 when I finally got the hint. I went to a 45-year-old listening.
What are you, 46 now?
I'm 57.
Okay.
I'm starting. I've gotten to that age where there'll be a fiber commercial on, and I'll go, shut up.
Like,
This is my show. What was that about? Come on. Kids, shut up.
Meta,
this is
what?
important. What about regularity? Pipe down. Oh, that looks promising. Oh yeah.
I know what you mean.
Coupons, awesome. Anyway.
No,
my needs have changed, is what I'm saying.
Sure, I get what you're saying. And also, but your mind has changed too. And I think that's really anybody, or well, maybe not anybody, but everybody should hope to evolve that way, where you go from the loud, obnoxious, know-it-all 18-year-old to the humble, modest, listening 45-year-old. Also, I think it's when you hit 45, you're just too tired to fight, right? Isn't it just easier to listen because you don't want to fight and you're just like, oh God, whatever.
Yeah.
You're just sick of everything.
Yeah. But when you run into that person who has something interesting to say, is that not one of the greatest thrills?
Well, it is, and that's why I love doing this, because I find people and their stories to be more interesting than really, frankly, anything else. Like, I think that's why most of us like history, is because it's stories about people, and we find people interesting. But ironically, a lot of people in the history field can't talk to people and get stories out of them.
Or reach them. That's something I learned late. I mean, you give me a compliment straight off, but I wasn't like that. My wife told me, you have to connect with people. The root word of history is story. You have to delve into the difficult thing of human emotion. You just sit there in statistics and troop movements and elections. My baby brother said, you've got to use humor because it's part of life. And he said, you are not funny, but life is funny.
See, that's funny, because you are funny, and I do enjoy your humor. Well, see, that is very hard to do.
I'm just going to interrupt here. I'm funny around funny people. I'm a comedian.
Well, most of that room last night wasn't funny.
Good point. Okay, there goes my theory. Rats. I'll rethink that thing. My whole self-identity has been... Thanks, Matt.
You're actually funny. I think you probably always had that in there, because you can't just learn that, especially later in life. Like, you can't learn to be funny. I can't learn to tap dance, because I never could dance any kind of dance. Yeah. People, last time I went to a wedding and I was dragged up on the dance floor and danced, somebody called an ambulance. They thought I was having a seizure. And I thought I was dancing pretty good to Dancing Queen.
Oh, that's sad because it's true.
Exactly.
I'm the same way. My wife goes, no, we're not going. We're sitting here, enjoy,
and drink your Cosmopolitan. Now,
and just settle.
Okay, this is the last thing I want to talk about here, because then we have to go to lunch. Okay. It's and then I want people to just go and listen to your lecture as it is, and not have me interrupting and all that.
It's been great spending time with you.
Well, of course, but it's better to have you go uninterrupted. All right, listen to this one here. This is just my notes here. Reason number 4. Now, again, there's a bunch of reasons why the veterans go, but reason number 4 is to reaffirm life itself. And you said, or according to my notes, you said, when government keeps talking about death, these vets are talking about life. Now, I'm sure some of these people in the government actually served, right? But they're playing to the general public.
And trying to get elected. This was an election period.
And so they're focusing on death because that's the thing that touches the public. But the veterans lived it. They saw the death. They brought the death. They risked the death. They've had enough death.
Yeah, that's it.
And they focus on life. What was the story about the guy with the dirt?
That several men had taken bags of dirt with them as they went back to the train station. And one was interviewed why he was doing that, and he said, I want to grow a garden of flowers. That this place has rejuvenated me, and I want to be a place that I used to remember so horrifically as a place now that can be a beautiful part of my life every day.
And I remember when you said that, the thought in my mind was that dirt, which was saturated with blood, is now being used, blood and death, is now being used to nurture life in these plants. And so there's like a beautiful poetic or poetry to that. And that's why I really liked your talk, because it had heart. And again, that's not a thing that you can learn to do because your brother gives you advice that you need to do it, or whoever gives you advice you need to do it. It's something you always had, and you obviously have genuinely, because there were points where you would get actually, it seemed like you were getting choked up. And so you made my friend Bethany cry twice that I saw.
What a sweetheart.
Yeah, well, she's also a little drunk. But
Why, me too, so that's how I got through it. We're coping in our own way.
But she...
we can stop at any time. We just like the taste.
Yeah, I know.
We don't have a problem. But no, quite honestly, not to interrupt you.
Please do.
You said it. I think we should end on that because you said it so beautifully.
All right,
I didn't think about the nourishing blood part, the actual flesh of their comrades was in the soil.
Because they were probably taking dirt from where they fought, right?
Yeah. I was looking at the flower. I wasn't looking at the soil. That's brilliant.
But why take the soil if it's not important? I mean, it's not just symbolic. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, to me, that's what I took out of it.
I mean, that scene in Saving Private Ryan when the sergeant was taking soil from each place and putting in canisters.
And I think that's why a lot of people want their ashes spread here, because they want to dissolve into the earth with the blood and flesh of people that they deem as heroic. And it's the closest maybe they'll ever get to glory on earth, is to be enmeshed in that. I don't know. That's why I want to be spread around here. But I don't want to be cremated. I just want them to chop me up and spread me.
You too?
Yeah.
My whole dream. It's in my will. Chipper shredder. I want this to be a dramatic end. I want this to really impact people. Head first. Because you don't want me bobbling around.
Yeah.
But just, wow, we are kindred spirits.
I'm telling you. You're like my older brother. Much older brother. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I like to pick on people. Oh,
I'm out of here.
No, don't go. All right, listen. Thank you very much for doing this. I really had a great time talking to you. I hope we stay in touch. Where are you living now? Tennessee?
Yeah.
How often do you get to Gettysburg?
Not as often as I like, but I'm because of the connections I've made here through CWI, I'm coming back a lot more.
All right, good. I hope you do. And when you do, come sit in on the show and have fun with us. That's it for us today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. Hope it made you think. Hope it made you feel. And I hope it made you click subscribe and like and go over to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. I'll talk to you later.